Good morning or afternoon or whenever you're seeing this video. It's been a hot minute on the YouTube uploads, but I haven't completely abandoned this platform. You're probably hearing a lot of sniffling behind me, and I don't have my green screen up because I am dog sitting for my neighbor upstairs. Where is he? Kingston. Where are you, Kingston? Come here. Want to show the camera? Come here. This is, well, you can't really see him, but he's like a pit bull something. I'm not really sure, but he's really sweet. So yeah, I'm babysitting him. Didn't want to put up green screens. He's already pretty curious as it is, and I didn't want him like knocking stuff over. So yeah, as a lot of you know, I've been very busy lately. I still have my full-time job, thank God. And I've been working on getting my new book, When Life Gives You Werewolves, published. I've also been trying to get as much time outside as possible, while while it's still not snowing. And at this elevation, that time is kind of precious. We only get maybe about 6 to 7 months of no snow on the ground, and of those 6 to 7 months, it's probably about, I don't know, 5 months of when there's no mud or slush or where the weather is absolutely perfect. So yeah, I've just been doing a whole lot of hiking. Went camping last week. Had my first had my first trip with some interesting, I don't know how do you get around YouTube's censors, but yeah, I'm guessing you guys are probably, it's Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. It was quite amazing for like the first half of it, and then I got really sick the second half. So 3 hits was a little too much. I know to stop at 2 now, but it was great. Got to hang out with my upstairs neighbors. It's their dog that I'm watching right now. They're over in Rhode Island. They're gonna get married pretty soon. So yeah. So I'll start this intro with my current books. As many of you know, and some of you don't, I have 2 books out already: The Mark of Amuli and The Varcross Key. Both are available in all formats, including audiobook. You can find them for sale at Amazon or my Patreon shop. And speaking of Patreon, if you enjoy my books and want to support what I do financially, consider joining as a paid member. You get early access to upcoming books and stories. Depending on the tier, you'll get access to both books in the shop, including audiobooks for the Macho tier. If I raise enough money this year, I'm probably going to be sending out physical ARCs to all of the top tier patrons for When Life Gives You Werewolves. So that'll be fun. And with enough funding, and right now I'm crowdsourcing the book, I should be able to ship things internationally, even though they're gonna bend me over and just have their way with me with the cost. But it would be something extra that right now I'm trying to figure out what I can do to differentiate the tiers to make the higher tiers more worth the money. I know that a lot of people are saying, oh well, we support you no matter what, but I always feel like there should be something extra that goes along with those higher level tiers, because I mean, you're talking $15 to $20 a month. That's more than Netflix. So I don't know, is it more than Netflix now? I've had a Netflix account in years. It's probably like, I don't know, Netflix is probably like $24 now with inflation. But yeah, I just want people to kind of feel like they're getting value for the money. But I do really appreciate the support anyways. Eventually, I'm going to start doing more exclusive stuff also for the higher tier members, including streams, live QAs, and more. Right now, I'm kind of picking the brains of my current patrons about what they want to see more of, so I can kind of squeeze that into my schedule regularly. And I think with the upcoming season change, especially after autumn, once winter starts, I'll be having more free time inside. Don't want to get too comfortable inside. I'm probably going to be learning how to, ski and do all kinds of stuff outdoors, but it's not going to be quite as much as I'm doing right now. So I do want to fill in those gaps with some, with some patron stuff. So currently, as I mentioned earlier, I've got a new book in the works, When Life Gives You Werewolves. It's a genre apart from the fantasy that I usually write in. And if you love character driven stories and something a little more contemporary and funny, I shouldn't say a little more funny. This book's fucking hilarious, in my opinion, anyways. But it does, like, it starts out really funny, and then it goes very, very serious into the emotional aspect of things like, mental illness, certain substance uses, just all kinds of things that I've dealt with, that other people in my life have dealt with, and I kind of put it all into book form. It deals with some pretty heavy stuff, but it does it in a very humorous way, especially like after all that stuff is done, we go back to the humor again. I don't like to keep people in despair for too long. But yeah, it's I tend to keep certain tropes in my books. The foundation being the found family. I have a thing for found families, considering, when you're kind of living alone in the middle of the mountains without any family at all, you kind of you kind of miss that, and I like to write about it because it kind of makes me feel like, I'm still missing something, but it kind of makes me feel a little less lonely, if that makes any sense. Boy, that sounded really pathetic, but it wasn't meant to. It's supposed, it makes me feel a little less, a little less alone, which is kind of nice. And I do like these stories because I do love the idea of a found family, and how, all of these strangers that, sometimes can't stand each other from all different aspects of life eventually find common ground, grow to love each other, get closer, all that kind of stuff. It's really nice. It's a little different from it's a little different from the usual shifter stories that you'll see in this genre, but yeah, I think this one will be a hit for all the people that like contemporary fiction, and especially rom-coms. Right now, in fact, I'm going to be working on this today. I'm getting the third draft completed so that I can send it out for editing. I have a GoFundMe set up to raise $10,000 to cover the cost of everything from editing, cover art, internal design, audiobook production, all of that stuff. $10,000, it seems like a lot of money, and that's because it is. And basically this $10,000 has been coming out of my pocket every, production cycle. Last year, for the Varcross Key, I spent around, I want to say it was $9,500 for the Mark of Amulite. Since it was my very first book, and I had to get it developmentally edited as well as line edited and proofread and all that kind of stuff like that. The developmental edit was very expensive. It was about $3,000, which is actually cheap for a developmental edit, but it was still very expensive to me at the time. So, and then line editing was another, I think it was like $1,500, and then I did all the proofreading myself, which meant going through the book quite a few times to get as many typos and whatever out of the way, because I didn't want to pay anyone else to do proofreading. I had to do all the internal design myself because I couldn't afford it. And then, of course, the audiobook was around $3,500. So these are not cheap. These are not cheap things to do, which is why I'm kind of crowdfunding everything now. And in fact, my patrons suggested, hey, why don't you just crowdsource this or crowdfund this? I was never really big on crowdfunding because I don't like begging people for money to do stuff. Although, I have to look at it this way. It's not really begging people for money. It's sort of like getting a lot of people together to donate to a cause that they will benefit from in some way. So this is not something that's going to me. All of this money is going to be spent on the book itself. So it's either going to be spent on the audiobook, which is going to be another, $4,000, I think, or it could be $45,000. I think I'm going to be paying Scooter about $4,500 because this is a bigger book, and audiobook production, it takes a lot of time. Last year, it took him almost, 9 months, 10 months to get the Varcross Key done. Now, granted, this was his very first audiobook, so he knows what he's doing now, but it's a lot of time, it's a lot of effort, it's a lot of going back, revising, editing. He has to run everything through me. I have to yay or nay it. So it's a lot of work, it's a lot of collaboration, and it's something that should be compensated as such. Editing for a book this size, when I send it out to a professional line editor, it's probably going to be about $2,500 to $3,000. Cost of everything's going up, so I've got to, and right now, actually, I think I've raised enough to cover or to almost cover the cost of editing, professional editing, which is really good because I'll be getting done with the first draft pretty soon, so I'll be able to ship that out to editing and not have to have that come from my own pocket right now. So yeah, and then of course I'm hiring an artist to do the book cover design, and this is going to be an illustration artist this time, so it is going to be a little more expensive. And he knows, he's actually doing my logo. He did the artwork for the GoFundMe. He's done quite a few fan art for the stories themselves. He's read everything, and it's always good to have somebody who has read your book do the book design or book cover design, and they're professional artists and they know what to do and what to look for. So that's going to be very, very exciting. I've already got a mental image of what I want on the book cover, and I think it's going to be quite the attention grabber. It's also going to kind of reflect the comedic value of the book itself. I'm actually looking at the script right now, and it says as of today I'm about 16%. I think I'm about 23% now of the way to the goal. So there's still a long way to go. I've still got 3/4 of the way to go. But remember, I just started this GoFundMe about 2 weeks ago, so the fact that people have been donating and we've already gotten as much as we have so far, I'm overjoyed by that, and it's really, really going to ease the burden off of me. I'm probably not going to make enough by the time I actually publish this book, which means that I'm not going to be able to pay Skuru right away. And some of this is going to have to come out of my own pocket, but I'm going to keep the GoFundMe up for as long as it takes. So, this way I can probably get as close as I can to 10,000. So this way I can eventually cover those or put that money back in my bank account to kind of recoup the loss. So quality costs money, guys. So please donate, share around if you can. I would be really appreciative of that. For those of you that have donated, I just want you to know I am very grateful, and because of you guys, I can start finding the editor next month to start editing this book. And also, I would like to kind of keep the editing within my own ecosystem, especially if anybody that follows me currently or anyone who's a patron who's also a professional editor, I would like to give you my business instead of just going out to a stranger and then giving them my business, because I know that if somebody's editing my book who enjoys my writing, they're going to put more into it or more passion into it or kind of know what to look for more than some random editor will, especially dealing with this particular genre of storytelling. Or I should say niche of storytelling, because this is not a very popular niche either. Normies are not going to really... Well, actually, normies might like this book, but who knows? I'm going to put the GoFundMe, my Patreon, all that kind of stuff in the description below, so please check out those links if you can. Of course, like always, share it around, get the word out there. The more people, the better. Before I get into the meat of this video, I wanted to also give an update on my fitness journey, as I'm still recovering from the absolute dumpster fire that was last year. I am now 30 pounds down, under 200 pounds again, finally. And I've actually been able to, retain all of my muscle and stuff, but there's still a lot to go, I just want more muscle. I want more leanness. It's going to take a while to get as lean as I want to be. My goal is getting under 15% body fat. It's taking a long time, especially when you're over 40 years old, getting, especially the belly fat, getting all of the different, there's a lot of fat around my arms, getting all that stuff to where you seem like you've got more definition. It takes a long time to do that. But the key or the goal, even when you're over 40, is to not get discouraged and to keep doing it, to keep doing what you're doing. I'm seeing, as long as I see the scale go down and I'm still getting stronger, that's a good sign. So, right now I've just been keeping up 10,000 to 20,000 steps a day. I work out, about 3 days a week, sometimes 4 days a week, depending on, my schedule. I'm also going to be working out after this video. So, and not only that, but my diet has pretty much stayed the same for the past 3 months. I eat the same stuff every single day. So this way I can get a better count of my calories. It's easier to count calories when you're eating the same things every single day rather than switching it up every other day because you're bored, but then you have to kind of recount the calories. You have to reweigh everything when you can just eyeball it. It's just so much easier. It makes things a little less frustrating. So that's why I kind of just eat boring, eat the same old stuff every single day. And of course, when I went camping last week, that kind of screwed everything up, but it was just for like 2 days, and I'm not sweating about it. I'm still in a calorie deficit. So, but yeah, that was actually my first time ever eating s'mores too. They're good, but I think that also contributed to getting kind of sick afterwards as well, because I'm not used to that much sugar. But anyways, with all of those updates out of the way, I will put in, some chapters in here so you guys can actually get to the video if you don't want to go through all of this introduction. Of course, I should have said that at the beginning of this video, but too late. Anyways, so with all that out of the way, I'm going to make a lot of enemies today by laying out some harsh truths for writers and aspiring indie authors. And this comes after, it was brought to my attention. Well, something was brought to my attention in the BookTube community, which Book Talk, BookTube, they're all a part of the same garbage. Let's get into the pain, shall we? So recently I was watching a YouTube video by an indie author and author-tuber that I, pretty much follow a lot. I just like to see where she's going. She can be very funny at times, especially when she's book reviewing stuff. I kind of like to see her passion in a lot of things, and that's Julian Greystoke. We'll link her video below. And she was covering the recent drama with yet another Book Talk star, Audra Winter, I believe her name is, who I didn't know or cared about until I started seeing her everywhere. And she just kind of started popping up on my feeds lately, and I'm like, well, what is this now? So, and it's not really a good thing to get this kind of publicity, and I feel bad, but at the same time, I don't, because these people, they may be young, but they need to have these life lessons early, especially when it comes to how they present themselves, how they advertise themselves, and what they're actually giving the people who give them money. So you're never too young to learn a very harsh lesson in life, and this is a harsh lesson indeed. The fact that this is Book Talk should come as no surprise by now to anyone with half a brain cell that hasn't completely rotted. But just about every author that comes from that platform is going to either write absolute garbage or grift their audience for a lot of money. If you're expecting more from that platform, you're probably not the brightest bulb in the box, or you were literally born yesterday. So if you have no idea who Audra Winter is, you're likely either male or over the age of 25. So I'll just give a brief overview because there's honestly enough about this person now that I don't really need to go into that much detail. So Audra is a 22-year-old indie author, of course, with a large TikTok following, who launched a pre-order campaign for a book that wasn't in any way, shape, or form ready to be published, or perhaps ever be published. She pre-sold around 6,000 copies of a story that was still in a 12-year-old's writing style. So, and when the book was released, people were, dare I say, a bit disappointed, to say the least. I just love it when indie authors go viral for reinforcing every negative preconception most people already have, and rightly so, about indie authors. So well done, Audra. Well done. You're giving us all a bad name again. Well, anyways, Miss Winter got a lot of harsh criticism, unsurprisingly, and she did not take it well at all, and broke, a major rule regarding interacting with critics online. As I've talked about on this channel a couple times in the past, one of the things that you shouldn't do is interact with any of your book reviewers in any way. I don't care if it's positive or negative. You leave the reviewer space to the reviewers and to the people who are, in the market to buy your book. You stay out of that space, because the moment you put you put your nose in there, you start to look very unprofessional. You start to look, in fact, you can probably tank your entire writing career if you do this, and if you do it the wrong way. So anyway, she goes on there and she's interacting with her reviews, and like a lot of young victims of their own bad choices nowadays, she blames her bad writing and responses on the fact that she's autistic. So I'm gonna kind of rock the boat here, and I'm gonna say most of the time nowadays, when someone's an asshole and blames it on autism, I can pretty much just assume that they are self-diagnosed. But anyways, she's been working on this story since she was 12, and while there are some young authors out there who have produced decent stories that were picked up by publishers, this is pretty much the exception, not the rule. You have to understand this, okay? And I'll explain that in a bit. Needless to say, her book, The Age of Scorpius, was what is referred to in the writing community as a heart book. And 9 times out of 10, these types of stories should never be published or sold for reasons I'll also explain later. I also want to get this out of the way. A lot of people have already reviewed this book, so no, I'm not going to read this, because I refuse to read bad books. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to put myself through it. And I'm also not going to put this author's story through more hell on my platform, because it's already out there. It's already been, through the ringer quite a few times already. So I'm also not a 20-something-year-old woman, so I'm probably not the target audience for a romantasy about a teenager's flimsy interpretation of astrology with a bunch of token diversity thrown in to meet the average TikTok users' criteria for literature nowadays. But I will say this, though, 6,000 pre-orders is nothing to sneer at. She can have an absolutely amazing career at marketing, but she's not going to find much success in the future for writing, I can almost guarantee. The damage to her reputation has been done, and in this industry, reputation is kind of everything. That's your currency. It's why marketing exists to begin with, and why we try to get as many people to care about a book as possible, because without a good reputation, especially after releasing a terrible debut book, what do you have left? You can only get so far on TikTok reels and marketing and your audience. You have to give them something of value. You have to give them something good. If you're claiming to be an author, you have to give people, something of quality to buy. So what happened to Audra is a lesson for every aspiring indie author out there. And if you want to find any measure of success in this brutal industry, you will need to know how to come to terms with some harsh truths about everything you think you know. So let's start from the biggest lesson we can learn from all of this. You probably shouldn't publish your first book. I know it's really hypocritical of me to say this, considering I did just that. However, there are some major differences here, okay? Number one, I wrote The Mark of Emuli when I was 26, not 12. Okay, so that's also a very big difference. Number two, I didn't keep anything from the old book except the concept. Everything was rewritten completely different from the ground up. I basically wrote an entirely different book from the one I wrote a decade prior. And three, I actually spent, again, over a decade honing my craft before attempting to tackle an entire rewrite of a full-length novel. And even then, I had to rewrite it quite a few times because I got so much feedback that, I realized publishing it then, or even in that state, would have done the story a huge disservice. So if you're told, hey, the book is good, but, and you're told that from multiple sources and they're saying the same things, you can't just publish the book in that format. And apparently Audra got a lot of feedback for her, for whatever first few pages that she posted, that, hey, this kind of reads weird. It doesn't, there's a lot of things wrong here. She took none of that feedback. She says she got editing, but you can always tell when someone doesn't invest in professional developmental editing or line editing. And I will say this right now, pre-selling 6,000 books, you can afford to get yourself a line editor. Or I'm sorry, you can afford to get yourself a professional developmental editor, one that's not your friend, someone who's going to look at your story objectively. A lot of people are scared of that. A lot of people are terrified of editors, and I don't blame them, because they're going to give you a lot of harsh truths about your writing, about what they see. Some of it is opinions. A lot of it is years of experience that they've had doing this craft or doing the editing. A lot of editors out there are not writers themselves. They're readers. They know what to look for, but they also may have a professional background in writing, like copywriting or maybe even teaching. So, but yeah, if she had enough money, she could have done something. She didn't. And that's another reason why I don't really feel bad for her at all. So that was something that I ended up doing with my first book. Was I had a professional developmental editor. He was from England, and he was an older, he was a middle-aged man, which that was another reason that terrified me to no end, because here I am giving him this book about basically monsters. Well, it's more than that, but it's got monster fucking in it, and I'm just like, oh boy, this is going to be interesting. But yeah, no, he really enjoyed the book, but he gave me a lot of feedback. And I still have that. I still have that summary of the editing, and I still have the original manuscript to this day, which has really helped me throughout the years. It was probably the best money I've spent. So yeah, those were the differences between my first book and Audra's first book. To clarify that. So can people publish a first book and succeed? Yes, and I'm proof of that with a giant asterisk I mentioned earlier. Can people publish a story they wrote when they were 12 years old with no improvement to their writing style and no objective editors to run a red pen through it and still have that story be a success? Not a chance in hell. She may have pre-sold 6,000 copies of a concept to a naive and frankly mentally undeveloped audience on a social media platform that caters to this type of person, but she did not successfully sell a good story people would have bought if they had the opportunity to just read a couple of sample chapters of it instead of just a few pages. The difference between writing a book, especially a full-length novel, and other forms of art is the ability to compare. Okay, if you just started learning how to draw, for example, you can compare your bad drawing to an experienced artist. If you're just starting to cook, you've got taste buds. You can taste your food to see if it's palatable. You can listen to your music and compare it to other songs that might be in the same genre. But with a book, it's a lot harder than that. It's so much harder to compare your writing to other authors, especially since there are so many writing styles. It takes more than just glancing at two different books to get a sense of what good writing is compared to what bad writing is. And a lot of that comes down to just plain experience, and also being very well read yourself. And all of this gets even harder when you're very heavily emotionally invested in your book. Being emotionally invested makes us blind to all the flaws of our stories and all the mistakes that we make, especially if that story is a heart story or a heart book. And I know I've mentioned this a couple times, so I'll explain what it is. Heart books are exactly what they sound like. They're stories from a place of personal indulgence, okay? They are stories, characters, and worlds you've grown to love over the years. They're your heart books. They're closest to your heart. However, these types of stories are very hard for other readers to relate to or get invested in because you've written the story for yourself and not for your readers. This is a self-indulgent story, okay? It's where all the Mary Sue characters come from. It's where the lack of real conflict or plot comes from, or character development comes from. When you're writing the perfect world and the perfect characters, it's hard to put them through anything that would be considered high stakes or paint those characters in a negative light with all the flaws an actual person might have or would relate to in some way. A second lesson you can take from all of this drama is you probably aren't ready for publication, and you won't be for a long time. The best books in the world, and this is going to also have a few asterisks in there, which I will explain too. But some of the best books in the world were, those that actually made an impact on society or lasted for generations were told by older people with actual life experiences. Is this true 100% of the time? Of course not. Nothing is 100% true, 100% certain all the time. But there is a probability that when you're older and you have more life experience, you will be able to write more relatable books and better books. Now, I'll give you an example of someone who was young when she published her first book that also lasted for generations. Mary Shelley was 18 when she wrote Frankenstein. But you have to remember something. Being 18 back in the 19th century was way different than being 18 today, okay? Back then, you weren't sheltered from the world as a child, suffering poverty, sickness, death of close family members or friends, being married, and even having children of your own when you're just a teenager. You could experience all of that in the 1800s before you've even left adolescence, okay? People were wise beyond their years because their years were short. Using the same example as earlier, Mary Shelley only lived to be 53 years old. So 25 would have been the start of her midlife, just for an example. Nowadays, 25 is the start of our real adult lives. So there's a big difference there. My point is, good writing and good character development comes from having experienced life in all aspects, good or bad. It's why some of the best artists, musicians, writers that are young for the most part had terrible childhoods. And they had to experience life sooner than some 22-year-old sheltered book talk influencer ever could. Most of the best authors throughout the late 19th and 20th centuries were in their late 20s, 30s, 40s, and even in their 50s and beyond. In the last couple decades, I'll be honest with you, I never really felt like a real adult until I hit my 30s. When I look back on what I wrote in my 20s, I never had a good grasp of real character development because I wasn't a fully developed character in real life. How could I put myself in someone else's shoes when I couldn't relate to the struggles I hadn't yet experienced myself? How could I write someone else's dialogue different from my own when I really never paid much attention to how other human beings interacted with each other before then? How could I tell a story when I didn't understand the fundamental aspect of storytelling itself? It took me 2 decades of writing before I was competent enough to try it. And it wasn't 2 decades straight of writing either, but it was 2 decades of gaining life experience as well as writing experience. You have to understand everything there is to know about writing, and then you have to learn more. It never really ends, but having basic understanding of how to write is a huge starting point for any aspiring author. Now, the third lesson, and this is more for aspiring indie authors out there, it doesn't matter if you're popular or a nobody. There's a high probability that you're not going to be a successful author. That's just a cold, hard fact you're going to have to swallow now. With enough determination and hard work, anyone can better their chances at success, but it's never guaranteed. It's just very few indie authors are successful because very few of them can tell good stories people want to read. And that's harsh truth. It's very harsh of me to say as an indie author as well, but it's very true. I could pull this out of my ass right now and it'd probably be somewhat close to true. 80% of the books out there written by indie authors, they're obscure and they're not popular because a lot of people that happen upon them just can't even get through the first 3 chapters. They're just not good stories. It's not good writing. It's very boring. These are not good books, okay? And as I mentioned earlier, anyone can write. Even a child can write. But the ability to tell good stories, that's not something that can be taught. You can learn how to write the most amazing prose in the world. You can learn all the rules and apply them to your work. You can have the backing of 6,000 doe-eyed followers on TikTok. But unless you put your concept into a compelling story that keeps people glued to the page, where people are literally losing sleep because they can't put your book down, that concept is just going to fall flat. Storytelling and author voice are 2 pieces of the puzzle when it comes to writing a book, or a good book in that case. But these 2 things are the hardest to master because they cannot be taught. Author voice, storytelling cannot be taught. You can have a roadmap to storytelling, but ultimately it comes down to, are you a good storyteller? Do you have a good author voice that keeps people on the page and connected to your characters? That can only come from within yourself. That can only be taught to yourself by yourself, and it only comes with experience. And some of that actually comes from childhood experience too. I remember when I was a child, I would come up with all kinds of different stories. Most I never actually wrote down. I just told them or would act them out through playing, or I would, there's also times I would draw maps of areas in the woods that we would play, and I would name them, and they would just be like, I would have like a story behind each of the zones. I should have maybe went into game design, I don't know. But it was just something that I would do as a child, and everything that I did always involved me kind of living in my own world, in my own fantasy world, coming up with all of these different stories. And that's something that, when you're a child and you have the ability to storytell, it can help you. It can be a great boost to your ability to tell stories in the future, to become an author in the future, a successful author, I should say. So I'll kind of repeat what I said earlier. It's like so many aspects of storytelling manifest when we're children, and good storytellers live in their own worlds like a second life almost. It's only when we're older that we can start to understand how to put those stories into words, and then let those words grab the imaginations of others. If you don't understand this concept at the most primal level, you're not going to understand how to write a story that actually captivates people. You might be able to write a story full of beautiful prose. You might be able to write a story that can be a literary masterpiece, but it might not hold anybody's attention because it's not a story that has any purpose or point. It's just a bunch of pretty words on a page. And let's say that you can tell a good story and you've written great stories. There are so many more hurdles to jump through before anyone will even notice you. And unfortunately, this boils down to luck. And it's not just a bit of luck either, it's a lot of luck. Okay, everyone hates to hear this because we've had this misconception that hard work pays off, drilled into our heads since we were children. But hard work only gets you so far. Now, it's a good launching point, but it only gets you so far. Luck is being at the right place at the right time, or writing in a genre that suddenly takes off, or being in a position to network with other people that might be popular enough to launch your career. And I will tell you this, there is some good news here because you can shape your luck. The more you network, the better your writing, the better your presentation as an author, which means, good cover design, great editing, good quality books. The more books that you have out there of that quality, the better your odds of getting lucky. Luck becomes less of a mysterious universal quirk and more of a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point. Sometimes it happens sooner, sometimes it happens later in life, but eventually it will come. It's just a matter of time at that point. But the problem is most people give up well before they get to that point, or they are just satisfied doing what doesn't work, and then they're unsatisfied with the results. It's like that Minecraft meme where the guy is about to hit diamonds but gives up right before he does. It's sort of like that's how being an indie author is. If you've got good stories, if you're writing good stories, if people actually like your work, it's only a matter of time before you hit diamonds and you become a success in whatever way you measure that success. So if I were giving advice to a would-be indie author, it would be the following. Okay, number one, I would write what people actually want to read. Find a niche you love that there's an audience hungry for. I found a niche very few people write in. And as my writing has taken off, more and more people that were hungry for those stories are taking notice. Many of them haven't read a book since high school, and my books got them reading again. There are scores of underserved readers out there that really have no interest in what kind of corporate pandering slop the publishing industry is turning out right now. They are looking for a story only you can tell, and a niche that you're interested in, that they're interested in as well. They aren't looking for some copycat to publish another version of ACOTAR. Number 2, if you're confident in what you write, learn how to not only market yourself, but learn how to network with other artists. Okay, a lot of, and when I say artists, I would say, yeah, keep writers in that loop as well, but there's only so far other writers are going to take you. In fact, sometimes having a network that's just full of writers is going to be detrimental to your growth as a writer yourself. And that's another topic for a whole other video, but I'm not going to get into that right now. A lot of us are introverts, and so many of us use that as an excuse, to languish in obscure mediocrity. I'm telling you this now as someone who has benefited from getting to know other people and other artists who really publicized my books enough to sell constantly. You're going to have a much harder or nearly impossible time marketing your books by yourself unless you have a lot of money or a really good social media presence. That's really the only way you're going to do this. You either have to network, or you have to have a lot of money, or you have to already have a very strong social media backing. Those are really the only way you're going to be able to get attention in this market, because it is very saturated at the moment, especially with the rise of AI books. It's only going to get worse. So you're going to have something that sets yourself apart, and you're going to need to have other people in your corner. Writing is not a solitary endeavor. Okay, it might be at the start, but if you plan on writing professionally and getting your book published, that is not something you can do yourself, and it never will be. So get used to that. Number 3, you're going to need to be willing to sacrifice your free time, your weekends, your holidays, your evenings after work. If you can't be bothered to put in the time, don't bother writing professionally. And I'm going to be very frank there, and a lot of you may not want to hear this, but don't bother. It's just not going to work for you. You're just going to put out crap, or you're not going to put out anything at all. You're just going to be wasting your time. Feel free to stick to Wattpad. Feel free to stick to, publishing your book for free for other people to read, or your fan fiction. But if you're going to do this professionally and you're going to have people buy your work, and you don't have the time to sacrifice or to put in to actually putting out quality stuff, just stick with what you're used to. Don't go into the publishing industry. Stephen King worked his ass off at his full-time job, sometimes 12 hours days, sometimes more than that, but he would make the time in the morning to write. He would write during the holidays, because that's what he wanted to do to succeed. And even after he became a wildly successful author, those habits that he developed never really left. He still writes the same. He still, he will still write during the holidays. He will still write during his free time, all that kind of stuff. Am I saying to have, I don't know, David Goggins level of discipline and sacrifice? No, you don't have to have that to become a successful author, but you do need to be able to put in some time, at least, an hour or two a day to basically be able to do this. And if you ever want to be a full-time author, you've got to push yourself to take that free time, or to sacrifice your free time, even when you don't want to. And I'm also kind of saying this from a place of privilege, because 1, I don't have a family, so I don't have to worry about that. And 2, I kind of live alone and have the time to focus, and I've even made areas to be able to focus. I can also grab my laptop, go out into the forest where there's just not a sound in the world, and I can just sit there and write. There are so many different things that I can do, and I can also sacrifice my holidays, because like I said, I don't have a family that I have to cook for, that I have to do anything for. So yeah, it's easier for me in my life journey to make the sacrifice to become a successful author. It might my saying that, sacrifice all of your free time, might come off as it's sounding kind of stuck up or from a place of privilege, because it is. But I'm just telling you like it is. If you don't have the time to do it, you're not going to become a successful author. That's just plain and simple. Stephen King still had a family. He was still able to set aside free time to write. It's just how it is. You got to be able to do it, or don't do it at all. Number 4, you need to be willing and able to invest money in your work. So you can publish something that's actually polished and high quality. Let's face it, not everyone makes 6 figures at their job, and writing certainly isn't going to pay the bills, especially when you're just starting out. But you need to be able to set aside money if you want to self-publish, okay? If you can't do that, you'll need to try the traditional route. Because the traditional route, you're not going to have to invest the money that you will to create a high-quality book that you will need to self-publishing. Notice how earlier in the video I said there's a $10,000 fundraiser that I'm doing right now to publish my book. Yeah, that money came out of my own pocket. Granted, you can still publish a quality book for less than that if you also don't publish an audiobook either. But you need to be able to set aside a few $1,000s to be able to publish a finished high quality book. That's just plain and simple. And if you can't, having no money is not an excuse to sell poorly written and edited books, because you're now selling a product to people, and I don't care what your financial situation is in that case. If you're selling a poor quality product to people for money, you can expect to get a lot of backlash for that. And nobody's going to care if you're making minimum wage and have a family, have 3 kids and I don't know, no spouse or whatever. Nobody cares about that. They care about getting what they paid for. So if you can't put in the money to be an indie author, don't be an indie author. Be a traditional author. Work on your craft enough to where you can break through the gatekeepers, where you can find yourself an agent, that agent will then sell your book to a publisher. It's just as much work as being an indie author, or being, I should say, a successful and polished indie author. But there's a lot. You don't have to pay for your marketing. You don't have to pay for all of this stuff. You get advances. You don't have to pay for editing. So that might be something that you should look into instead of indie publishing. And once again, I'm saying this from a point of privilege. In the past, I was a software developer. I was making good money. I could afford to spend all of that money on my first book to get it published in a good state, in my second book, and now my third book, and I have a great job. I don't have a family, so I can invest all this money into writing. A lot of people can't do that, but you should be able to at least set some money aside to be able to do this. Writing a book takes a lot of time, and in that year and a half, 2 years that you're writing this book, set aside a little money so that you can get the book published properly, so you can get the book edited, you can get a good book cover, and so on. Number 5, you need to be willing to accept and learn from criticism and failure, because failure is not optional. And let me repeat that. Failure is not optional. You are going to fail over and over and over again. It is guaranteed, and it will happen all the time. If you can't put your early drafts in front of people to rip apart, don't put that shit in front of paying readers to rip apart later, because I promise you're not going to like that. You're not going to like the outcome of that one bit. That'll be all I say on that. I mentioned this a lot earlier when I was talking about the Audra Winter thing, so keep that in mind. Can't accept criticism. Don't bother publishing. Don't even bother posting your work publicly at all, even in Wattpad, because people are going to criticize it. Number 6, be willing to put yourself in uncomfortable situations within reason. What I mean by this is get comfortable discussing your book publicly, or putting it out there in places where you think it will be well received. For example, you could follow a bunch of book Reddit pages. You could follow a bunch of Twitter accounts, YouTube channels. If there's a request for a book that meets your book's criteria, you can always recommend it in those spaces. Now, if you spam your book or advertise it in places you're not wanted, that's going to get you a one-way ticket to a ban or a block, or just completely tank your reputation and make you seem very desperate and needy, and probably give people an impression that your book's probably not all that great. Number 7, it may be fun to write to your strengths, but don't neglect your weaknesses either. If you want to improve your writing, you have to be open to writing things you may not be good at in order to practice. Let's say that you're great at exposition, but write shit dialogue. Well, write more dialogue. If you suck at describing things enough to where people can actually, tell where they are or what they're looking at, or let's say that you suck at action scenes or showing instead of telling when the story calls for it, well, that should be what you should be focusing your efforts on improving at that point, because all of these aspects are a part of storytelling. You can't just be good at one thing and specialize in that one thing and expect to publish an entire novel with that one thing. It's just not going to be successful. Number 8, and this kind of ties in with an earlier one, if one bad review will absolutely destroy your life, then don't bother publishing or writing anything publicly. It doesn't matter if you write the best book known to man, someone somewhere is going to hate this book. One person who likes Monet may think Van Gogh is ugly, while the person who loves Van Gogh might find Monet confusing or pretentious. Welcome to putting your creativity on display for public criticism. Now, keep in mind, if you write a really good story, more people are going to like it than hate it. If your book has 100 reviews and 60 of them are 1 to 2 stars, you've probably published a turd, and you should, do what Audrey has done and take the book off, either rewrite it or don't publish it again. And speaking of reviews, and this is going to rub a lot of people the wrong way, if you're getting bad review after bad review, the problem isn't that people don't understand your genius. It's that you're not a genius and your story's meaning is vague, incomprehensible, or just plain stupid and unrelatable. You're going to write a lot of objectively terrible stories. I have, and guess what? That's normal. That's how we learn to get better. And if you're obstinately holding on to this belief that you're infallible, then embrace being a total failure, because that's what you are. And I want to end this video by saying that I am not by any means a huge success, okay? And in fact, I'm not anywhere near satisfied to, right now. And I probably never will be, even when I meet that success in the future. I measure success in this field as being able to subsist fully on my writing while this being my full-time career. I don't make anywhere close enough to be able to solely live on book royalties or Patreon alone. In fact, lately it seems with every patron I get, I lose 2. It's just the way it is. Or one month I might make just $400 in royalties, while another month I might make over $1,000. All that money usually goes right back into my books in some way. So I'm not going to sit here on my high horse and pretend to be some guru of the publishing industry like so many author tubers out there, with really less to show for it than I do. I can only tell you what has worked for me so far and what I've seen working for others, so I can warn you about the pitfalls you will most likely encounter. If you're coming into this thinking you're the next Neil Gaiman or J.K. Rowling, and you will be the one to shake the literary world through your brilliant prose, you're going to be humbled to the point of destruction. Because I can guarantee you're not anywhere close to as good as you think you are. But there's also a flip side. If you're coming into this thinking everything you write is garbage with absolutely no belief or confidence in yourself, you're going to meet the same fate. You need to come into this with both confidence and humility and an eagerness to not only succeed, but never stop learning and improving until you do. And until you get to that point, everybody, you're just going to be a shit writer. If you think that everything you write is shit, everything you write is going to be shit. If you think everything you write is genius and you have absolutely no need to improve or listen to other people's feedback on your book, everything you write is going to be shit, and you're never going to improve, and you're never going to get better until you overcome those hurdles that you have set for yourself. I want to also end this video by giving a huge shout out to my higher tier patrons, and really all of my patrons who have stuck with me through thick and thin. It's because of you that I could afford things like funding my editing and audiobook productions, while also keeping me encouraged to keep writing, and also funded, all of this equipment that I have for making these YouTube videos as well. Your support it just means more than you know. And, like I said earlier, I'll eventually figure something out that I can do for the higher tiers that will set it more apart from the lower ones. Still figuring that out. Bear with me. So until next time, happy writing.